Sound muted. Muted. User in your channel started recording.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bang Draft and Pray podcast. I am Pedro Barbosa with you, and I have Mr. Earl Goddard with me.
Hello, mate.
Hello. So, we have a very nice podcast about a very nice race that we had this weekend. For those of you that are living under the rock and love motorsports, we had Spa 2022 this weekend, and it was a very nice weekend indeed. We had mix-up all over the weekend, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. So, starting from
Where do you want to start?
the beginning maybe of the weekend, because when we came into the weekend, we had like almost like on Thursday, we noted everyone started talking about penalties that we're going to have for the race, because some people were going to do some swaps on maybe mainly power units, and so we're going to have one of those weekends that like half of the grid almost we're going to get penalties even before the race. So we had Max Verstappen, we had Charles Leclerc, we had Lando Norris, we had
Valtteri?
Valtteri Bottas, and we had
Schumacher? Did Schumacher
Schumacher
take a
and
pen?
Ocon.
Yeah.
And Ocon. So, knowing this, and we went into like I think even on Friday on the second practice section, we saw that maybe Max had just a little bit of an edge towards the rest
Yeah.
of the field. It topped by a little bit. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it was like 3/10 or 4/10 to second place, and
8/10.
8/10 on practice.
8/10.
Oh yeah, it was already on practice a little bit about that. So we went on to Saturday with that in mind, that maybe, and actually Max was talking about feeling comfortable with the car from minute one, the first time that he sat on the car. And I think that was one of the things that set the tone of the whole weekend, because and you can talk about this more than me, because when you get to a weekend and you start by, and you have a good balance on the car, and you just have to then focus on being fast. You don't have to solve balance problems.
Yeah, he's just dialed in at the moment. If you look at him and then the team, they're killing it.
Yeah, and the other thing that we had was also the flexi floor thing that we had, like we talked about in our first half of the season review. We had
new regulations.
Yeah, new regulations for the rest of the season, because of the flexi floor thing that they were talking about, that both Red Bull and Ferrari had, and maybe Haas, I think they were talking about that. So we were maybe about to see, or everyone was expecting Mercedes to get much closer to the rest of the guys.
Yeah, I think Red Bull might have been slightly sandbagging on how much that was going to affect them. If anything, it's made them faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like that.
Yeah, they were like Mercedes a few years back. They're just another level at the moment, and confidence is the difference, isn't it?
I heard a thing. I heard a comparison from this season to 2010, but Red Bull again, that we had. Red Bull in those days were used to start really slow on the championship, and then once the middle of the season came, they just got away from everyone. So, are you expecting that to to happen, or it's just track
I don't know.
specific?
We can't. Let's be honest. We'd like everyone to say, "Give him the trophy now." It's the way Max is driving. But then go back to last year and how it all ended. Anything's possible. A long way to go, but the only people at the moment capable of fighting them are the Red Boys, and they seem to be fighting themselves as much.
Do you really think that the Red Boys have any? Because
I think
we're
they.
going to
I
get
think
to this part later in the podcast when we get to the race, but they seem to have a good car. But at least for this race, I'm not sure that it was that fast of a race car. To be honest, race pace wise.
yeah, but then it's the nearest to them. I think it's the only one capable on the right weekend of actually winning races in a straight fight.
Yeah.
And even then, it'd be a bit touch and go. But Mercedes isn't anywhere near yet. But like I say, we'll talk about George was doing well. We won't mention Lulu.
Yeah, I think we might have problems calling Lewis that. So the views of Mr. or the nicknames that Mr. Earl gives are not the views of the podcast. It's one of those situations.
Everything I say is my opinion.
Yeah. So once we got to qualifying, I we had, like, let's be honest, we had Max above everyone else, like hands down, because we went from Q1, it was the usual suspects, and we had a little bit of a preview of the race there because, um, as it was pointed out to me, the car that it's most similar to Ferrari, it's the Haas, and it did really, really bad.
They did, yeah.
They qualified P18, and Mick was able to get to qualifying 2, but he was in the back of that P15, so it might
15, yeah.
It might have been as much as very nice lap from Mick, more than probably a performance. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking now in retrospective, but I didn't think this on Saturday. But now thinking about it, I think it was a very nice preview of what was going to happen, because for those that don't know, we have Ferrari and Haas and Alpha for now.
Yep. Yeah, that's another story there.
And but the Alpha, I think the Haas uses the same gearbox and the same suspension on the back from Ferrari, I think, or at least very similar. And Alpha was the only one that actually spent the resources to do. It's the same gearbox as the Ferrari, but has a different the casing. It's different, so that, and they have a different configuration on the rear. I think rear and front, because they use a different way of the
suspension.
The push rod and the pull rod, and let's not even start talking about that because it's a minefield. It was the talk of the testing and the car reveals in the beginning of the year. So the Haas is much more closer to the Ferrari, and they did really, really badly. So we had Sebastian Vettel was actually thrown out of Q1 by Mick. It was like crazy. It was like 0.00 2 or something like that of a second. And and it was Latifi got disqualified, and Bottas didn't even take part of qualifying, so he was he was out of the question.
Yeah.
So once we got then to Q2, we had poor Danny Rick being like in 11th place. And then it was, I don't have, actually, I should have been more professional and have.
It was Danny, then Lando, and Albon in 9th.
Yeah.
And then George and Lewis.
Yeah.
As I can't give him a nickname. In 8th and 7th. And yeah, that was Q2, yeah.
Yeah. So we lost a Mclaren. We lost both of the. At this point, we lost both of the Haas and the Alphas.
And the Astons.
And the Astons, yeah, because
Lance and P14.
Yeah, P14. So yeah, and that was basically qualifying too. The driver that I think did the best out of, let's not talk about Max, was Albon, that was able to get to Q3 again in that dog of a car. And
super slippy car.
Yeah. The most impressive thing about him I think he went a little bit the same way as Max on the setup. He went with a very slippery car and was able to get a lot of speed in Sector 1 and 3 because they have the biggest straights. I know Sector 3 has some corners, but from
flat out.
Yeah, from turn like 8 to the end of the lap, it's to the bus stop. That it's not a bus stop anymore. It's all flat out in a Formula 1 car. So yeah, they were able to then control the car and don't lose time. Actually, Max gained time in every sector, even in second sector. So that was amazing. And Albon was able to keep it under control on the second sector and was able to go to Q3 again this year with what we think it's the worst car of the grid. So yeah. Okay, so then quickly to qualifying 3. We had Max only doing one run and improving 1 second, more than 1 second on his Q2 lap to go do a 1:43.6, and it was like I seem to not be able to find words to I don't know. This lap was like must have been one of the greatest that I've seen in recent years. I think it was one of those laps like it was doing in Saudi last year, I think, that everyone was on the edge of their seats and then he crashed on the last corner. But it got understated because it was the first lap of the first flying lap of Q3. But once we saw the time, it was really special.
Yeah. Oh, no, he's definitely descented, didn't he?
Yeah, it was full send on the first lap because he was going to get the penalty anyway for the race. So, like Verstappen did that, and Leclerc was supposed to do that. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And Ocon did that as well, which was do one lap with fresh tires for starters, like into the first flying lap, and then try to help their teammates on the second lap. Actually, Max didn't do that because he just went off.
Yeah, get out the car. I'm done.
Yeah, and then we had the one of the most iconic messages of the weekend, which was good old Charles just asking, "What are these tires?" And Do you want to talk about what Ferrari managed to do?
Yeah, I think this is a long-running theme this season of what's going on there. Just send him out to give the slipstream to Carlos for his flying lap on a brand new set of tyres, and then go with we'll stay out and try do a lap. So he's got.
So it was actually the other way around. They sent him for the first lap, flying lap, and as soon as he got out of the pits, it was like, "Am I on scrub tires?" Because they were supposed to do the same thing that Verstappen did and Ocon did, which was a good first qualifying lap, and then go out on the second one and with scrub tires and help a little bit. But yeah, they gave him
The wrong tires.
So they have, for those of you that don't know, there is one set of soft tires that it's only for Q3. So you can't use it anywhere else on the weekend. So you can use it only on Q3. And they didn't give that tire to Charles. They gave him the scrub tires from Q2. So his lap wasn't that great. To be honest, I don't think they changed anything because I don't believe he would be able to beat Max with that mega lap.
No, they just seem to be fighting themselves, don't they? And just I don't know what you can say about them with their.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of them must be being paid by Red Bull.
So Q3 and the top 10 in the end was Verstappen P1, which was not pole because he had the penalties. Then Sainz P2, Perez P3, Leclerc P4, Ocon P5, Alonso P6. You see a pattern here. And then we had Hamilton and Russell. Hamilton was 1.8 seconds away from Max. And when he heard this, he just laughed.
Yeah, he didn't like that, did he?
Yeah, it's crazy. And
I mean, in Formula One terms, that's like a day and a half. That is, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and in a weekend that was supposed, because of the flexi floor thing, to at least get them closer. But yeah, that really didn't happen.
No.
I think it was the other way around. And then in P9, Albon and Norris only did one scrub. I think it was on scrub tires, and it was just one lap. I actually tweeted that Mclaren was starting to use Ferrari strategists, but I wasn't. I didn't know that it had a penalty. So yeah, it didn't make sense because he was going to start from the back. I think it was one of the ones that did the most changes to the car. I think only Bottas was going to do more than him, so it was just strain on the engine.
Yeah,
you don't need that. But the starting grid, we're talking about something completely different. Because Max and it was Max, Leclerc, Ocon, Norris, Bottas, and what's this starting grid?
Joe,
I didn't.
Yeah, he was back there.
He was back there as well.
He's back in 18th.
Schumacher, and we see here Tsunoda because he was able to. They found a problem on the car from Saturday to Sunday, and so he was going to start from the pits. I think he started from the pits.
It did, yeah.
So it was supposed to be Verstappen P15 and Leclerc P16, but then they all got bumped up because of Tsunoda.
On the spot, yeah.
And then just before the race, the other AlphaTauri, they found the same problem. I think, and Gasly started from the pits as well. But because it was so close to the race, he started from the pits, but his place on the grid was just oh,
Excuse me.
bless you. But his place on the grid was empty, basically. So we're really seeing Verstappen starting on P13, not P14, because that was an empty seat. You just started there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anything to say about qualifying and all that shenanigans?
Yeah, not really. I think
Not
we
really.
about covered it.
Yeah.
About covered it.
So let's go to the race, and it was a hectic start of the race. Lap 1 was amazing. From the start, the most interesting thing was the way Sergio started the race. I don't think I've seen someone start the race in that way, like weaving all over the place since the 90s. It was like proper old school way of starting. He had no grip, it seemed.
Yeah, he was definitely all over the place, wasn't he?
Yeah, he one
But he
important
did sort of
factor. He had medium tires, and Sainz had and all the other ones had softs. So that might be something.
Yeah, it does count for a lot off the line. So, but I think he got a bit of a poor start as well, whereas the rest, old Super Alonso, got a cracking start.
Mega start. And Lewis as well, and Russell as well. Both Mercedes started really well, and somehow they were able to not crash into T1. I thought that Perez was going to crash into Alonso because Alonso was just behind him, and he was weaving all over the place. But no, he was able to control the car just before it was all going to go wrong into T1, and then they went all in a nice single file towards the Camel Straight. They did Radillon and Eau Rouge and all that stuff, and then we had one of the incidents of the entire race. We had a crash between two buddies, Mr. Lewis Hamilton and Mr. Alonso, on the way into Lacombe. Do you want to give your assessment of what happened?
I think Alonso said it right, but yeah, Lewis didn't give him any room. I think it's the basic gist of it. He turned in trying to squeeze Alonso out, and I think out of anyone on that grid, Alonso is going to probably be the one person that will not be intimidated by Lewis, and they crashed. Lewis's back right to Alonso's front left, and Lewis went skyward and ended up damaging his engine, I'm sure, on the re-entry.
I think it was an hydraulic hose that came loose and sprayed Alonso all over, because Hamilton just went flying into the air, and when he came down, he something broke on his engine, and he actually thought he had a puncture, but it was just that coolant and all of those fluids were going into his tires, so he had no grip.
Yeah, I think the end of it, he did say in his interview that he takes responsibility for it, which is good. He shouldn't have done it, really. Shouldn't have given more room, but these things happen. Gives us something to talk about.
Yeah, because unlike some of other incidents, this one, Alonso was actually over the curb on the right side, so Hamilton had all of the space in the world. I think I've heard people say that he is used to have a car advantage over some of these other teams, and he was going to be able to just go past as such a speed difference between the cars that he was gone when
which he did
Alonso.
have for a number of years.
Yeah,
And maybe he's got, much like Alonso said, he's used to racing at the front, and it's different. And especially now when his car is clearly not the best.
yeah. With this, we're not saying that we agree with the words of Mr. Alonso that called him a, let's say he wasn't very well intentioned with his comments, but we have to take into account that these are radio messages to the team in the heat of the moment while just being crashed by another driver. So, and we have some animosity from back in the day between these two. So that might get into the
Yeah, there's
equation.
there's a lot of water under that bridge.
Yeah, so we're giving that 100% to Lewis. We agree on that, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and like you said, Lewis admitted his mistake on the same, like the not on the right turn, but on the left turn. We actually had another incident, and it was between the two teammates, the two Astons, and Vettel just squeezes Stroll into the gravel. But that wasn't even noted. I don't think so. I have one question. Do the stewards look to these fights to maybe review them, or they rely solely on teams reporting it?
I'm sure they'll be viewing it themselves, whether they deem it's necessary to actually follow through. They may not until a team contacts them and says, have a look at that, or what you're going to do.
Yeah, because I actually think it was one of the most like from that part of the race. I think it was like a really big squeeze from Vettel. I like Vettel, but it was one of those. I don't know if it was payback from some of the moves that Stroll already did to him this season, but it was like really a good shove into the gravel.
He's off now, so he doesn't mind, does he?
he doesn't have to listen too much to Daddy. Okay. One other question that I had for you: do you think that not giving Hamilton a penalty was a good decision on this? I know he basically was out of the race, but yeah, he massively screwed Alonso's race because Alonso had front wing damage all of the race just because of that.
He could have ended up with a grid penalty for the next race, and I don't think it would have been too harsh. But then at the same time, he's not put Alonso out the race, put himself out, so it's a bit of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I wouldn't have been surprised if he got a penalty. But the stewards decided it, and the stewards that
it was
right. So, yeah.
I just had that question because I found it strange that it was just noted and not being reviewed. But yeah, it's not one of the worst decisions the stewards have made this couple of years. So
we're not going there.
We'll let them off in that part. So in the end of this lap, actually, Max was P8. So it was from P14, P13 to P8, and Charles was P10 because they were actually into the next couple of corners. They were Charles was battling Max, but then Max was able to pass. It was on one of the Astons. I think it was Stroll, if I'm not mistaken, into the bus stop. So they were split. And then on lap 2, we had another incident. It was Lafitte, and it was again in Lecombe, exactly on the same place as Vettel and Lance Stroll, and Lafitte just lost it. I heard a suggestion that it was marbles left by the junior series. Do you really believe that, or he just misjudged the corner?
No, it looked like he'd put a wheel onto the dirt. It looked like he'd just gone that bit too wide and back end came round on him. So, yeah, I think he dropped it more than blaming marbles.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, because we had many battles into that. Even for lap 2, it was already many battles because we had like a train of cars from P1 to P20. Or almost P20, because at this time Hamilton not only dropped out but he stopped the car on the middle of the track. And from the Lafitte incident, Ocon, that was just behind him, was able to pass, but then it just the smallest tag on Bottas, and Bottas, the birthday boy, just became bitch on the gravel.
Yeah, game over.
Game over. And yeah, Lafitte was able to continue, and then we had a safety car, but not because of the Bottas Lafitte incident, but because Lewis stopped the car basically in the middle of the track. Not in the middle of the track, but it was on the asphalt part of the track. I didn't really understand that, why he didn't move the car to the grass. I don't know. It was not actually the only thing that it did. I don't know if you heard this, but he was, I think he's being reprimanded for denying going to the medical center, because the F1 cars have a G sensor, and if it trips that G sensor, and you basically, when you get out of the car, you have to be reviewed by the medical staff on the
get cleared.
Yeah, and get cleared, and he denied it. So I think they are reviewing it. I don't think it will come to much. I mean, he did a long walk to the pits. Like, we saw some pictures and some videos of him going off.
Yes.
But yeah. So we had a safety car, and during the safety car, something really funny happened. Mr. Max Verstappen, because of the Hamilton and Alonso incident, had a visor full of dirt, and he tore one tear off. They're called tear offs. If you guys don't know, Mr. Earl has a helmet like in the back of him, and in open wheel cars, like open cockpit cars, they now have some, it's like a film, it's a plastic film that it's glued to the, or many of them that are glued to the visor of the helmet, and then when they're dirty you can just tear them off from the helmet, and it actually got lodged in Leclerc's front right
brake ducts. Yeah. Couldn't write it, could you?
Yeah, there's actually footage of that. So you couldn't like make this up. So unfair for this race was for Charles, and he had to pit, but then they gave him the medium tires. Do you think that was the best decision?
I think at that stage of the race, you've got to go for the hard tire and try and go as long as you can. and see if you can get another safety car or something to bring you back into the game. And then, if need be, go softs at the end with the safety car. But again, Ferrari doing what they think is best. For all we know, the car might not have liked the hard tyres and they felt the mediums would go long enough. But yeah, it was definitely strange.
Yeah, in the middle of the race commentary, I think it was commentary in Portugal. Actually, they said that Charles or Ferrari gave an interview, someone from Ferrari, and they said that Charles, whatever happened, didn't want the hard tires for this race. We covered this on the last podcast. In Hungary, they gave him the hard tires and it completely destroyed the race. But it was different circumstances. And actually, as we saw later, there were some quick guys. Halpin was able to, and he pitted, he was able to make them work for him. He actually had a very good race. So yeah, I think it was the hards in that part of the race were the best option. Yeah, so we had the safety car. Lafitte pitted as well for a new front wing after tapping Bottas. And then consecutive laps, Max, when he got under racing again, it was lap 5 or 6. And then lap 6, Max P6. Lap 7, Max P4. Lap 8, Max P3. So in like 5 racing laps, Max went from P14, that it was really P13, and was on the podium already.
Yeah.
So we had Max 4.5 seconds to Sainz. Right now I have to say that, of course, the safety car helped him be a little bit closer to Sainz at this point, because if the safety car didn't happen, I think Sainz would be able to be a little bit ahead on the road.
Yeah.
But we don't really think that would matter for this race, do we?
No, I think he would have caught them in the end without the safety car help.
Yeah, so at this point, in lap 10, Sainz pitted first. He was on the softs, as was Max, and Perez was on mediums. And as soon as Sainz pits and Max passes Perez, makes Perez look like he was almost stopped in the middle of the track, and is on the lead, like virtual lead, because Sainz stopped at this point. So we were in lap 11, lap 12, and Max was already in P1.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm going to go through this like really quickly because I don't think that it's that interesting. But then Paris, the most interesting part of it is this part, because Paris pitted on lap 13, so 3 laps after Carlos.
Mm-hmm.
With the mediums, he only was able to make them last 3 more laps, and even so, Max with his softs was able to do even 1 more lap with them. So he was able to do 1 more lap than Paris on softer tires.
Mediums, yeah.
Yeah. I think that this was the thing that made him like go to not virtual but actual lead of the race in so few laps.
Mm-hmm.
So at this part, Perez squeezes Charles when he gets out of the pits, going in the camel state, in the final part of the camel straight, and squeezes him to the top of the
outside,
curving,
yeah,
the outside, do you think that they should have had a look on this incident?
Probably not. I don't think he was. He didn't. Okay, by the letter of the rule, you've got to have a tyre within the white line, and if someone's at the white line, you have to give them space. Did he give him space? No, because he pushed him up and he was over the curb. Again, the stewards probably should have looked at it. For some reason, he decided not to.
Yeah.
He's just. I don't know what else you can say about it then, without being controversial.
Maybe what you're trying not to say is that they didn't look at it because I don't know actually, because if it was the other way around it, I would actually think of a reason that just to keep the championship alive and not penalize Charles, but I really don't know. I'm not saying that I think he should have gotten a penalty, because it was one of those situations that it was, yeah, you could make a case for either, and I don't really know if Ferrari said anything. They must have done, because Charles complained already.
Yeah, but I think it warranted to being reviewed and no further action, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are on the same frequency there as well. And at this time, Ferrari talks to, I think it was, they talked with both drivers saying they were already on Plan D. So we had like 10 racing laps, and we were already on Plan D. And actually, I don't know which lap this was, but I think McLaren took a dig, a little bit of a ribbing to Ferrari, because at some point Lando's engineer just said to him, "So Lando, we're looking at Plan G," and then left it at that. So they are already even starting to make fun of Ferrari live on the middle of a race. So yeah. And at this time, Max pits, and then he overtakes Sainz for the lead a couple of laps later. I mean, once Max got out of the pits, it was like almost 2 seconds faster than Ferrari. And Ferrari wasn't even with a good pace at this time. Sainz was losing time to Russell once he got passed by both Max and Perez. And actually, Charles, we cannot say that Charles was faring much better, because he was losing time to Russell. So, yeah, Ferrari were nowhere on the pace this weekend.
No, they weren't. They definitely didn't have as strong a weekend as we would have expected them to. On Russell, I think he did a very good job hanging on as long as he did to them, just a solid performance with what he had.
Yeah, solid performance. We actually saw that like I was hearing from everyone during the qualifying that Ferrari was concentrating on the race, and I didn't really believe it, because Max was so far away. Normally, I think I'm not wrong by saying that normally we have, like, when someone concentrates more on the race and someone more on qualifying, normally we have like 2-3 tenths between similar placed based cars. So I really didn't believe that, but who am I? Just a sim racer that says some things. But yeah, they were really off the pace, like 2 seconds. And Mercedes seemed to actually have a nice, nowhere near Red Bull, but a really nice balanced car for the race. And Max, at this time, when Perez overtakes Carlos Sainz in lap 21, Max already has a 7-second gap to them, so he was already
He's checked out. He's gone.
3 laps, 7 seconds. Okay, crazy. And at this point, we start hearing Ferrari talking to Charles, seeming to basically ask him, what do you want to do in the middle of a race? And putting, do you think we should continue on the medium tires question? And I don't. It just seems to be
I mean,
a
it's
mess in that part of the garage right now.
I mean, yes, you ask the driver. You hear it with Lewis all the time, and Bono going, "Yeah, the tires are good. I can," and even Max, the tires are good, and stick with him in that. But that's like asking for getting feedback. Getting the way Ferrari were asking someone that didn't know what they were doing, asking and say, what tires do you want this time? Yeah, just I don't get it really. What? And it's if it was the first time you could go, yeah, okay, mistakes and bad weekend, but this seems to be a consistent thing. How is it not being sorted out in post race debriefs and stuff? That's the bit I don't understand. Ferrari will happily sack a driver because they're not performing and kick him out, but maybe they don't want to look inside.
Yeah, but my question, and we already talked about this a little bit on offline, not on stream. The same doesn't seem to be happening to our friend Carlos Sainz. So Carlos, we seem to have like a split on the garages, and we have one side that's really second guessing the team and trying to, if the reports that we heard that it didn't want the hard tires and it had to be medium tires and all that stuff, I think it's a red sign already. But then when you have one side of the garage second guessing all of the strategies and the other side of the garage that seems to just have the teams back, and Carlos always is very, very nice to what Ferrari is doing. So,
but he's also standing up to them and saying, "Don't do that." When they, for example, a couple of races ago where they tried to get him to hold back on the safety car, and he's like, "What are you doing? This is crazy. You're gonna." So he's also prepared to stand up to them a bit. Where I don't know if Charles is.
yeah, I don't know. It just seems that Charles doesn't have the right approach right now, in my point of view. I think Carlos, when he second guessed them, it's more that in that race it was Silverstone, and it was because they didn't want him to fight with Charles, and it didn't make any sense because they pitted Sainz and they didn't pit Charles, so it was only going to make mayhem for Charles. So yeah. So he second guessed them there, and the only other that I can remember was, and it was understandable, it was France. In France, he was battling with Perez, and they said box, and he said not now because it was basically in the middle of a overtake. So yeah, it didn't make any sense to beat them right away. Just let the guy overtake. Yeah, he's in the middle of a of a battle.
Yeah. They seem to be trying so hard. It's almost like they're trying so hard to be clever at Ferrari and outthink everyone that just messing themselves up.
Yeah,
That's how I see it. It's just they're almost trying to be. They're trying to make stuff happen that they don't need to make happen. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. Yeah, the dynamic is crazy right now at Ferrari. They really need to sort it, and I think what Charles did this race, or the way that both Ferrari and Charles approach this race was not really. It's not going to work, to be honest. And they have to start because you have to trust your team. Your team has much more information
Data.
than you. Yeah, much more data than you. So yeah, they have to find a middle ground that they can work with. And I think Carlos is doing that much better. The only question with Carlos is that right now he doesn't have the pace to be fighting like Charles. So yeah, he has to find whatever he has to find on the car. And Charles is just fast in that car. So yeah, we have those two parts. So enough for now about Ferrari messing up strategy.
Yeah, until next weekend.
No, until this weekend, because we still have something to talk about. So from this point forward, it was just a cat and mouse game between not really Charles, because he didn't have the pace to get to Russell. Russell was P4, so we had Max P1, Perez P2, we had Carlos P3, we had Russell P4, and we had Charles P5, and then we had a big gap to Alonso, or big-ish. It was not that big. Actually, at this time, it might have been Sebastian, because Alonso was on a bit of a different strategy. To
Yeah.
the guys in front, he was pitting earlier than all of them, and that actually made a bit of a difference in the end. So yeah, we were with this cat and mouse game between Russell and Sainz, because Sainz Ferrari didn't have the race pace, and Russell had a bit of pace, but he wasn't really able to catch enough Carlos. I think they didn't show on television, but he must have done at about I don't know, lap 40, 39, 40, he lost like 1 second to Carlos, because he was able to get down from the 2 seconds mark, and then he went up again. And then on lap 41, 42, Ferrari called Charles in to put a brand new set of soft tires to go for the fastest lap, which at this time was Max's. And all mayhem started to happen on that part of the grid.
Yeah, sort of didn't go to plan, did it?
Yeah, so what happened was that Charles didn't have a very good pit stop, and it was like very close, so that he was able to come out in front of Fernando. And he came out in front of Fernando, but it was like half a second,
yeah,
something like that. So, and even if you know how the pit exit is on Spa, it's a really tight corner, so you don't really have, and in cold tires you don't have enough grip to get a good launch into the Eau Rouge and Radio and then Camel Straight. So Alonso was able to pass Carlos when he got out of the pit.
Charles.
Charles. They have the same first name. It's it's confusing. Ferrari, you have to hire different name drivers. So he was passed by Alonso on that lap and had to repass him on the last lap of the race. And that basically screwed his fastest lap attempt. He was like 0.6 seconds off of Max's fastest lap. And he was just able to pass Alonso on the last lap and finished P5. But when the race ended and it was the standings in the end, the race ended with Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Russell, then Charles, Alonso, Ocon, Vettel, Gasly, Albon. Is the top 10, and we got a message that Leclerc was being reviewed for speeding in the pit lane. And he was found to be guilty by 1 kilometer an hour. So it's crazy. I know it's crazy, but
Rules are rules.
Rules are rules. So we have to follow them. And he had a 5-second time penalty, and only lost one place. It was almost by half a second or 6/10. He almost lost the position to Ocon as well. So he ended up with no flying no fastest lap, and no P5. So P6.
Yeah, and apparently the reason for speeding in the pit lane was a brake sensor issue because of the tear off. So
do we really believe that, or is just Ferrari trying to not put the blame on? Because the feeling that I have from Ferrari right now is that they are trying to keep Charles happy, to be honest.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a discussion maybe for another day, but that's the vibes that came out of Spa for me. So we had Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Russell, Alonso, Leclerc, Ocon, Vettel, Gasly, OP, Alex Albon on P10 with a lawnmower of a Formula 1 car. Stroll.
The views of Pedro Barbosa.
No, the views of Mr. Earl. He was the one who said the car was a dog. Stroll, Norris, Tsunoda, Guan Yu Zhu, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Schumacher, Latifi, and then the ones that didn't finish were Bottas and Hamilton. And the last three, Magnussen, Schumacher, and Latifi, were the only ones being lapped by Max. And actually, we have here 2 drivers finished outside of top 10 that I think it's another one of the teams that really underperformed this weekend, which was McLaren. Do you want to talk a little bit about them? Because both of them finished behind both Astons, and they were a bit garbage on this track as well.
I don't know what's going on there either. I mean, okay, Daniel's been struggling all season with that car and getting it to like Lando
started from the back.
Yeah, P12 with the issues. He had a sort of nothing race.
Yeah, I actually thought like in the first half he was like sort of P12, P11.
Yeah.
And I thought, he might be able to get a top 10 after all, but then it just went away. It was
he just sort of had nothing race. Sort of, okay, we started to do some pit stops. Okay, we finished. Right, go home. There was nothing. Yeah, nothing about it. So
very disappointing.
I expected him to be like top half of the top 10, 7th, 8th, something like that. Is I think his potential, but he's obviously just not got the car working right. I don't know if they bought any upgrades.
Yeah, they were the team that brought the most updates.
Okay, they bought the wrong package then. They needed to bring the other box of upgrades.
I don't know. The only thing that makes me think here is that they knew they were going to start from the back. Do we think that they are trying some stuff? Because historically, in the last few seasons, McLaren seemed to have a very nice car in the straights, and here is all about straights. And actually, I think Lando was one of the fastest ones, but I don't think it. But it must have been because we had a DRS train from Albon back.
Yeah, I don't know. They might have been trying something. Next weekend will tell. this weekend coming. It's we'll I don't know. Can you put it down to they've just had a bad race because they were both fairly close to each other? No, was that the performance of that car on that track on that day? And it is what it is.
Yeah, that's the really good question. So next week we have Zandvoort, a very different track from this one. I know you've driven Spa. Have you driven Zandvoort in the old configuration? I mean, because now
I
it's
drove. Now they've got the NASCAR banking.
now you would like to drive that.
Yeah, I drove the old version, and it's a lovely track. Good fun. And I think if I remember correctly, it was a max weekend, 100% last time.
Yeah.
And judging on his form, Red Bull's form, you'd be a brave man to bet against him for next week. Barring
Talking about bets, we cannot finish the podcast without mentioning that. Let's remind ourselves. I bet on Max 3 weeks ago to win this race. Who do you bet on?
I bet on Charles. And then someone organised these brakes to overheat.
It's the other way around, isn't it?
But it's easy to pick the guy that's the winning.
Yeah. I got a feeling from that. It was Red Bull seemed to be ramping up for a very nice end of 2022.
Yeah, I think they're going to get. This is the pattern we've seen many times before, where the team gets a head of steam behind them, finish this year off strongly, straight into next year. Not much of a regs change, so similar cars straight back in. And I wouldn't be surprised if we go through a couple of years of Red Bull dominance, or at least them being the number one team and others playing catch up.
Yeah,
I think next weekend, next race, Mercedes might be. We know they're not got the best straight line, and there's only obviously the one straight there. So the car was good there last year. They may just be best of the rest.
Yeah, they were best of the rest this race as well. Maybe they could have fought for.
I think maybe they'll be fighting Ferrari, or on Ferrari's heels if Ferrari can actually get out and do the track. But then Alonso, I think, could be one for a bit of a starring role.
Yeah, actually, see, Alpine is giving me very good vibes. They seem to have a really nice race car, both qualifying and race car.
Both driving well. Ocon with his 2 double overtakes at the end of Kemmel in the race. So he's full of confidence and obviously pushing the car on, which is pushing Fernando on. So I think they could be, when it comes to your McLarens, I think they might be up there if they can get the car dialed in. But like I said, I think they've not had a really bad race the last couple of races, have they? They've been consistent.
Yeah, the only apart from the Mercedes, Ferraris, and Red Bulls, the only car that seems to be able to fight with them it's Norris. It's not even McLaren. It's Norris. Let's be honest. And they had a difficult start of the season, and maybe that's why they now are a little bit more farther away from McLaren, because they had a double point finish, and McLaren didn't score any points this race. But yeah, I think I'm not. I don't like this because I'm a Norris fan, but I think that for this year, I think Alpine has the measure of McLaren, to be honest, and I don't think we'll see any surprises there.
No, unless they find something some setting in the car and just unlock some speed. I don't think. And I agree with you. I think Lando is one of the top drivers and one of the exciting next crop of drivers that are coming through, who, given the car, I think can compete with Max. Just about.
Yeah.
But he's just not got the car at the minute.
Yeah, and let's not forget we were talking about this when we were talking about Ferrari and the dynamics there. Carlos was very close to Max, so they were about the same in Toro Rosso, and the only time that they were at the
Together,
same
yeah.
together, and so yeah,
and him and Lando were very close together as well.
Yeah, Lando
at McLaren. So
McLaren. So yeah, Sainz seems to be struggling this year, but we cannot forget that last year he finished ahead of Charles on his first year at Ferrari. So he is not. People are trying to make him look like the slower or the number two driver at Ferrari, but I don't really think that he deserves that.
No, definitely not.
So yeah, so next week Zandvoort, a very twisty track, almost nowhere to overtake. It's a classic track, a track that was acceptable in the 70s and 80s, but right now it's a spectacle. I'm not against those tracks. I'm not a Monaco hater and nothing like that. But yeah, if Ferrari don't find a massive step forward, I think it will be a Red Bull 1-2 again. So let's see. Let's wait for Friday. It's this Friday. So just two quick things before we exit. One more race result that I have to talk about, because we have a Portuguese descendant. He's actually flying under the French flag, I think, and both his father and mother are Portuguese, which is Dylan on the Porsche Cup that won both races this weekend at Spa and is at the front of the championship now. So we're looking at I'm flying the flag with a Portuguese descendant going. Maybe trying to win the championship this year. And we have to talk about the news that came out this weekend, which is we'll have a new team, at least a new power unit for 2026, which is Audi, which you have a little bit of experience in dealing with. But yeah, so they are going to get in with and I think this is the most surprising part of it, is that they are going to get in. Porsche, they are going to get in as well. It's not 100% confirmed, but almost. They already have copyrights for F1 classic names and all of that stuff, but they are not going because they are both from the VW banner, but they are going with different engines for F1. They are not going to try and save a little bit of money, and they will announce the Sauber. I don't know, the unnamed team that they are going to be working with, and pretending that they don't own 75% of Sauber right now. And that's actually Alpha didn't just say that they were going to not renew their contract with Sauber. So yeah, we think that's going to be the way, don't we?
Yeah, it'd be good for the sport. Let's be honest, the sport is for manufacturers now, and it's not for your privateers like Williams, and they just can't compete. I think the Porsche and Audi running under the VW group, but they're still their own sort of entities, and they still allow them. The fact that they still allow them to go and run with their own ethos and signature style of racing in cars, and that I think is brilliant. So And if you look at the performance of both of those marques at Le Mans, it's going to be interesting to see what they can do.
Yeah, Audi is starting from nothing. Not even the engine that Porsche already built. So they are going to start from zero, turbo hybrid V6. The one thing that they have going for them is that they have actually very large experience in electric powertrains, and that's actually going to be half or even more than half of the power for the next power units. So they have the factory going on for that. They have the Dakar electric car that almost won this year. The Dakar, they finished P2 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that.
Funny that Audi is joining. Yeah, we have live chat. Yeah, and they were the first manufacturer to win Le Mans in a hybrid car. So I think they actually, I think that they have a good good odds to actually come up with a decent engine for the start of the new regulations, because I think it's dissimilar enough to this ones, and with the engine manufacturing cost cap and the extra money that they have to spend because they are a new manufacturer, I think they actually have a good opportunity to really start very well from the start. The only thing that we have here is the partnership with Sauber. Partnership. If they own 75%, it's their team. So how they are going to do that, they maybe, because they already own the team, once Alpha gets out of the way, maybe they start and just try stuff.
Yeah, buy the rest.
Until 2026, and maybe. Yeah, but let's see how that goes. So this was our race review. We'll actually do next weekend. We still don't know when, if it's going to be Sunday or Monday like today, that we're going to do the review. We'll announce that on our social media. So I've been Pedro Barbosa. You can find me on Twitter at Pedro Barbosa SR. I've been with Earl Goddard. You can find him his handle is at Earl Goddard with 2 Ds. And you can find the podcast in every social media and every podcast provider. And our handle is Bump Draft Prey. And if you have questions for us, you can email us to bdappodcast@gmail.com. Any closing thoughts?
No, I can't think of anything. I'm just looking forward to next race, and seeing. Hopefully, someone can give Max a challenge. I don't really want to sit through 2 hours of Max disappearing off in the front, do we? We want a bit of a race.
Yeah.
But are we going to get it?
Yeah, that's the question. We'll have the answers next week, because it's a very different track. And let's see. We can just hope for the best. So I've been Pedro with Mr. Earl. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll catch you next week.
Cheers, guys. Really broken it.
I really didn't break it. See ya.